We can't stop talking about it because we have a long way to go.
Welcome to the Last Catherine podcast.
Because she never graduated high school. Once she got married, that was it, at 16.
Oh, because she was married before Joe DiMaggio.
Right.
Yeah. Tell us that story. What happened? What was the...
Well, she got married off at 16 in 1942 to a neighbor boy because her foster parents were going to have to move out of state and they couldn't take her with them. So it was either get married or you're going back to the orphanage. Okay, well, I'll get married. And then while he was off in war, she started doing the modeling, and, he came home and said, "You're not doing this anymore." She said, "Well, I guess I am." And so they got divorced.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really strong thing for a woman of that time to do. Because that was my question, is because we went off on a tangent, but I was thinking, well, how did he feel about that? He couldn't have possibly, because women were kind of property at that time. You can flaunt you're my wife. You can't flaunt your sexuality to anybody but me.
Well, but it's actually funny because she was married to Joe DiMaggio when she did the famous scene in The 7-Year Itch, and he was actually on site watching her film, and she kept having to do take after take of having her dress blown up, and he actually walked off the set because he was so offended that his wife was letting everyone see her undergarments. And by this time, it was known who Marilyn was and what she was famous for, and yet, even as her husband, he was still terribly offended by that scene.
Mm-hmm. And that actually, I think, led to the divorce.
Which was it? How long had they been married?
9 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
So more importantly then, because I think, most people are intelligent. I mean, if they don't go to school or whatever, they have life experiences that shape them into who they are, and they can speak intelligently about their lives. So she obviously had this, rich internal dialogue that was just how she dealt with being this incredibly out there public figure. But more important to me that I'm hearing is how she kept standing up for what she wanted to do. So even though she was shaped by the studio and was shaped by all these different things in her life to create this Marilyn Monroe persona, she wanted to do that, and that gave her power in her world. And so when her first husband was like, "You can't do that," she's like, "Yeah, I can," And then her second husband comes along, and they're probably very in love. Well, I'm not sure what you were talking about, that they were still in love and wanted to maybe get back together at the end, and he still had a problem with her. She's like, "Well, I'm going to stand up for what it is that I want to do, and if that's me being sexual and showing my underpants, then I'm going to show my underpants."
Right.
And what a thing to get divorced over. I want to show my underpants. but that's a really strong thing for a woman now and at that time, really. I mean,
no, it is.
If your husband's even now, you can't show your underpants, and you're like, "I'm going to show my underpants, we're getting a divorce."
I'm going to show my underpants.
That's still something to walk away from a marriage because of that.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how long until Arthur Miller showed up?
Well, she actually said she met him in 1952 or 3, and she was dating Joe DiMaggio, and she actually told somebody, "I'm going to marry Arthur Miller." And they're like, "You're dating Joe DiMaggio. What are you talking about?" And so they got married. They must have met in 55.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but totally opposites attract or something, because they were an odd couple.
They were married in 56, I want to say. And they had a civil ceremony, and then she converted to Judaism for him, and then they had a religious ceremony.
No kidding.
Yep.
I didn't know. Wow.
Yeah, she was raised Christian scientist.
And then how long did that last?
A couple of years.
Yeah, about 2 years. But he was not there the whole time. Because didn't he travel, or he went somewhere?
Well, he was called back. He was indicted in the communist witch hunt in the 50s. He got called into the Un-American, what was it called? The House of Un-American
American Activities.
Yeah. So he had to testify and prove, they wanted him to name names, and he didn't want to name names. And actually the studio heads called Marilyn into their offices and said, you make him name names, or you're going to name names, or something, something like that. And neither of them ever did.
Yeah, I bet that ditzy blonde role really helped her in that moment.
Right.
What do you mean? Tuna casserole? I don't know.
Chicken, or is it tuna? I don't know. So yeah, a lot of her time that she spent in England filming The Prince and the Showgirl, I think he spent back in Washington.
Something funny that just popped into my head, just about playing the ditz, I'm not sure. I mean, young girls in our culture and women probably still play that little bit of role to manipulate, like for cops and getting out tickets, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know I was speeding.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I was 16, I did that.
You hate to cop to it too, though, right?
Yeah, but
You know?
of course, yeah. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but that's what I did that for sure.
No, yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I'm much less charming than I was when I was 16, but yeah. So that's just funny that's. It's funny and sad. I mean, it's sad, but
I just had a flashback to watching a beauty pageant as a child, and that was one of the final questions that they asked of like the final like 5 contestants, and it was like, what's the most outrageous thing you've ever said to get out of a speeding ticket? And they all giggled and gave their answer. But there you go.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was like one of the most pressing questions that they could be asked at that time.
In the last Miss America pageant, didn't they get asked about ISIS? Like what to do about ISIS?
Yeah.
What to do?
Yeah. So you have 20 seconds to formulate this plan for world peace.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're gonna
You know, these are smart women, but
talk about getting scrutinized at every angle. Like put you in a bathing suit, put you in a this, put cream on your teeth so that your smile looks whatever
spray
it
glue
is
on your butt so your bathing suit doesn't droop.
Right.
And then get up there and answer
really
questions.
do that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely they do. There are reality shows about this.
Oh my
There are
gosh.
documentaries about this.
Glue on your butt.
Yeah.
And they have these things they put on their teeth. I mean, and then find a cure for world peace.
Cancer, everything.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have
But still
have a
be
platform.
beautiful,
Exactly.
though. Which is so, that quote you said, that Marilyn, or you said that she said, what was it about being pretty? To always tell a girl
that she's pretty, even if she's not.
Even if she's not. That is so heavy to me. Because there's so many implications there, and it exposes so much about her psychology at that time. You know.
Well, that's how girls were raised. I mean, you're supposed to be pretty, and you're supposed to be a credit to your husband, and you're supposed to be, a good housewife and cook, and that's your life. That's your job. You stay home and you take care of the house, and you entertain when husband brings home business guests or somebody from his family comes over. Very I Love Lucy, Bewitched.
Leave it to Beaver.
Leave it to Beaver.
Be charming and clever.
Be charming
Be
and
silent
clever.
unless you're spoken to. I mean, I don't know during that time, but were women expected to also have other talents, like obviously things like sewing and cooking, because those are talented, but like playing the piano, because a long time ago people would be like, a well-rounded woman should be able to play an instrument and should be able to
Draw and
and
write poetry.
yeah,
Well, maybe not write poetry. That implies thinking. I don't think so in the 50s as much. I think it was more
household duties.
Yeah.
Budgeting.
But it was also, I mean, the 50s, because you had so many, the modern appliances, the invention of the refrigerator being more, modernized or brought into every home. And then, so I think like that idea, like you were like the perfect domestic housewife, like not only did you have your pearls and your, poofy skirt, but you also made this amazing casserole and, 6-course meal. And, while you were wearing your heels and vacuuming, you also took care of your 3, beautiful, perfect children. So I think that was very much about images and be doing it, but also looking good doing it.
And Marilyn, she never had children, right?
Miscarriages.
Miscarriages.
Really? So actually, there was one of them that was the result of being in a show, wasn't there? Or?
She was pregnant during Some Like It Hot, which is one reason why she definitely put on weight for that show. She wasn't her typical 115 pounds or whatever, but she lost it, I think, at 3 months during the filming.
Wow.
She lost a couple of pregnancies during the Arthur Miller period.
Was it? I mean, she wanted to have kids then.
Very much
Yes.
so. Very much so. And it always saddened her that she couldn't.
So Arthur Miller period ended when?
60, 61.
So not long before she died.
Right.
And then when was that the big thing where she sang for, getting back to my earlier question,
Right.
when she sang Happy Birthday? Was it Happy Birthday she sang
Yes.
for the president?
Yep. And then it went into a
Everybody's
version
seen
of Thanks
that.
for the Memories. Yeah, that was 62.
So marriage was already over with Arthur Miller.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then and I don't know how she ended up, how did she end up there singing to Jack Kennedy?
They asked
Happy
her to.
Birthday? Who did?
Peter Lawford, who is a Kennedy brother-in-law.
Okay.
She was friends with Frank Sinatra, and then by extension, she was friends with Peter Lawford, who was a member of the Rat Pack.
Okay.
And then he was married to a Kennedy, and so she was friends with that group. She would actually go over to their house a lot.
Wow.
But yeah, she was asked, and she got permission from the studio to take time off from filming a movie to go and sing Happy Birthday to the president. And then that's one of the reasons that she got fired from Something's Gotta Give.
So she was
Why?
making that movie at the time?
Yeah, she was
Is that-
making Something's Gotta Give.
Well, because she kept missing work because she was due to illness. And then they found out that. So even though she had asked and was supposedly given permission, then much ado was made about, her going to see the president, singing Happy Birthday. And it's like, oh, well, you looked fine during that performance and you seemed to be able, to do that just fine, but you've missed, however many days on set. And that's also part of her reputation is that she was notoriously difficult, not to work with, but just to get on set. Like she would lock herself in her trailer. She would have to have like motivational coaches. In fact, when she was doing Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Jane Russell had to give her like so many pep talks and you're so good, you've got this, you're a great actress, and it would take hours sometimes to coach her out to just deliver 3 or 4 lines.
And then she would have to do lines over and over and over again, repeatedly, because her nerves would get the better of her. Or later on, unfortunately, she was heavily medicated with prescription drugs. She would go through, I think it was like 24 takes to go, where's the bourbon?
Wow.
So this goes back to her deep-rooted insecurities.
Very much so.
And maybe that then manifested into depression. It sounds like depression, somebody locking themselves away and medicating themselves.
The mental illness did run in her family. And so there's also the possibility that might have played into her issues.
And, at such a young age, she was on her own. She was swept into this world at 16, getting married at 16, and, not getting a chance to really, I guess, approach it from a standpoint of stepping back from her life and saying, what is this really doing to me, and how do I feel about myself, and how do I feel about this?
Right. Well, and also going back to her, belief that she wasn't attractive when she was younger and having everything or all of her self-worth coming from outside validation. Of course, you're going to be really, really sensitive to any sort of scrutiny, with especially when it's coming to, your career and are you a good actress? And that was really important to her. She wanted to not just be a pretty face. And so I think that added to, she would really overthink it and she would get really in her head, and then she would essentially just psych herself out, and then she would be paralyzed by the anxiety that she wasn't going to be good enough. And I think that was a prevalent theme her entire life.
Absolutely.
So you brought this book of poetry, which I now want for Christmas. It's on my Christmas list. And so
I got it for Christmas a couple of years ago.
Well, so there you go.
did she value her poetry? Did she value her output other than, she obviously valued her beauty because that was something that she, her whole life, that was something that she valued in general.
That was a moneymaker.
Yeah, but her poetry, the couple I read before we started filming, were really kind of eloquent and deep, had these really deep insights. So what did she value that?
Yeah,
I've never seen any evidence that she put that forward at all.
right. And I especially think, it's interesting that even though she was married to an author, Arthur Miller, no steps were ever made to get any of her work published. And so I think that she was I mean, it's totally speculating, but you'd imagine that if you're married to somebody who is well known and respected, and you maybe share your work with him, and he maybe doesn't feel the same, I don't think he would.
Well, sorry, it was real quick. Her poetry is very disjointed. I mean, it's not. It's poetry that you read now. It has a dreamlike quality to it. So I bet Arthur Miller wasn't like, this is valid poetry.
Right.
It feels like dream lyrics, kind of.
It's very blank verse. Maybe not quite as abstract as like E.E. Cummings, but it's in the same vein, I think. But it goes back to something that we mentioned prior to filming. Arthur Miller apparently left his journal lying around one day, and when they were married, and she happened to read that he was disappointed in her and her intelligence, that he thought before they were married that she was more intelligent. And then they got married and started living together, and apparently she hadn't lived up to his expectations, and that just absolutely crushed her. And so if she's writing poetry, or she's writing stuff down, character analysis for her movies or anything like that, having somebody who thinks less of your intelligence, I wouldn't want to show that to them. I would be terrified of being ridiculed even further.
Right.
Yeah.
So you would, I would play up my strengths at that point, which is probably what she did, which is the physical aspect.
But I mean, even in her personal life, then she still had to try to perform to what somebody wanted of her. Yeah, she couldn't be the person she's supposed to be the most vulnerable with. She couldn't.
She had to be Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. And it just, it really led to the disintegration of that marriage and the spiral that, would kind of define the last, year and a half of her life.
4 years.
So then we get there. We need to get to that point here. She died. How? Why? And what are the stories? We gotta have all the details.
There are books written about.
Can you condense it in 30 seconds?
Oh.
She died in between Saturday night and Sunday morning.
August 4th and August 5th.
Right. She was discovered by the housekeeper and her psychiatrist.
Yes.
But then they waited a few hours before calling the police. We don't know why. But she had an overdose of Nembutal and chloral hydrate, I think are the...
What were those for?
Those are sleeping pills. She had insomnia. Terrible cases of insomnia, which was another reason why it would be hard for her to get to the studio on time, is because, if you don't fall asleep until, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and you're finally asleep, you don't really want to get up at 6, 7 o'clock to, go in and put in a less than adequate performance if you're still exhausted. And back then, they didn't, if a doctor gave you a pill, it was good for you. They didn't understand the concept of side effects. They didn't understand the concept of addiction as well as we do now. And so, especially the doctors on set who were probably just nurses, like registered nurses or something like that. Well, okay, you're not going to sleep tonight. Well, here's a pill, and then you can sleep and you'll be fine, and you can be on time in the morning. Oh, you're still groggy in the morning? Oh, well, here's an upper for you. You'll be fine. And you get this big cycle of addiction starts to happen. I'm sure, it was similar with Elvis and Judy Garland.
Yeah.
And people were trying to get her to take fewer pills. Paula Strasberg, Frank Sinatra were big on trying to get her to slow down, take less. She got to the point where she was poking holes in her pills so that they would try to take effect faster. And she would doctor hop, I think, as well, to some extent.
So she overdosed on these
sleeping pills.
Sleeping pills.
Yep.
They find her dead.
Yep.
We are assuming that was there any discussion was this an attempt at suicide, or was it
the official report says suicide or accidental suicide. She was found with a phone in her hand, so it was assumed that she was trying to call for help.
Wow.
But there are a lot of details that just are off about.
Can you throw a few of them out?
Oh, like the housekeeper who found her. Differing stories say that, she saw the phone cord underneath the door, or she saw a light on underneath the door. Well, Marilyn always had the phone in her room, and you can't see a light under the door because of the rug, the way how high the carpet was with the door. And why was the psychiatrist there? Why did they wait several hours? There was supposedly a woman screaming in the middle of the night, you killed her, are you happy now? That one of their neighbors reported. There's, you get people who try to blame it on the Kennedys. Some people claim to have seen Bobby Kennedy in LA that night when he was supposed to be up near San Francisco. You get people who blame it on the psychiatrist and the housekeeper. You get people who blame it on, the mafia is another one I've heard. There was a guy who was supposedly a CIA operative last year or a couple of years ago. He was on his deathbed and said, I killed Marilyn Monroe. There will never be answers. And in fact, I distrust any biography of her that actually claims to know what happened. I don't think there's any way that we can know. The phone records for that night disappeared for years. The FBI was tailing her for years and years. There's just too many variables. And it's possible that it was something as simple as, she took too many pills and then realized it and tried to call for help.
But with so many different things that were weird about the story, then all of a sudden conspiracy theories and what have you start popping out.
I think when somebody is so well loved, I mean, I think this can go from in a family, if a family member dies and there's a little bit of like suicide or something going on, or somebody so loved by so many people look for answers, it makes us feel better to understand, to seek understanding, I'm such an emotional person.
Are you okay?
I'm okay.
Well, it's like
I'm ridiculously emotional. Anyway.
I mean, with the Princess Diana thing, we know it was a car crash. We know what led up to the car crash. We know that the driver was intoxicated and they were being chased ridiculously fast in a Paris tunnel, and they just lost control. But still, there are people who, the monarchy had it in for her, or different people.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, there has, it's like a murder mystery. We want there to be a bad guy. And there isn't in something like this. The bad guy is, the depression, in the case of like Robin Williams, or the, mental illness is, the bad guy. But it's hard to blame that. You don't have somebody you can throw in jail.
Then you're blaming the person that suffered from it.
And you don't want to do that because they're so beloved.
Sorry.
We went through like her whole life, so.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been utterly fascinating, to say the least. Interesting, amazing. I didn't know any of this stuff. Like I said, for me, it was just that I've been lately talking to so many people that are so intrigued with her. Here we are 50 plus years after she's gone. And she's still an iconic figure. I thought we've got to talk about her and her role in women's existence in the United States, how they see things, and what role she had in sexuality and womanhood in general. And it sounds like it's pretty significant. Thank you for listening to this, and thank you to you guys for being here. It was just fascinating having both of you here to talk about this. And once again, we're at lastcatherine.com. Comment on anything that you like on the YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook, please. And leave comments about anything that you like or don't like about what we're doing. We've been getting some of that stuff, and we really, really appreciate it, because we want to make this thing useful and be able to get a good message out there for people. And I'm going to remember this time. And Twitter. We also have tweet at us and to us, and we'll... We talk a lot and share a lot of things on there. We even have a Pinterest page, which is utterly fascinating too.
I love our Pinterest page.
Yeah.
So it's just Last Catherine. So pinterest.com/Last Catherine. It's good books on there, good articles, everything. Lots and lots of pin boards.
Oh, cool.
So
you were awesome, Pallas. You know that? I love doing this with you.
Thanks.
She's a stabilizing force for me.
A little absurd, but I feel...
No, that's great. So anyway, thank you very much.